Greetings and salutations, my friends. Today we're gonna take a look at software engineering career ladders. It's a topic that's sometimes not discussed very often, but I think it's worth looking into. And sometimes people just expect everybody to know about career ladders. And I believe it's similar to first graders when they go into the first class. Teachers generally expect them to be able to learn, and nobody explains them how they should learn. And like it's in their DNA or something, or everybody's able to learn by themselves. And I believe it's a topic that's worth discussing, so this is what we're gonna do in this talk. First, I could not resist inserting this terrible pun here, so forgive me for that. And of course, we're not gonna talk about actual ladders, we're gonna talk about metaphorical ones. But yeah. So, what are we gonna talk about? Generally 4 points. First, I would like to tell you what is a career ladder and explain why I think it is needed. Number 2, how we can specify ladder and position requirements. Number 3, I'm gonna show you an example ladder that I have created for the purpose of this talk, and we're gonna go over position overviews and explain who is a senior software engineer, staff software engineer, engineering director, and so on. And as the last point, I would like to give you links to further articles, books, and videos that you can use to expand your knowledge about this topic. Now, before we begin, let me put a disclaimer here. Basically, everything in the talk is my own opinion. And you know what they say, opinions are like assholes, everyone has one. So do not take everything that I say as granted and try to think about it by yourself. Also, I don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody does. And there are lots of very subjective topics, so you will have to create your own opinion on them. Also, career ladders, job titles, and job descriptions are really generally highly company specific. And if you see two companies having principal software engineers, you can't generally compare these two. It's like apples and oranges, because they may have vastly different responsibilities and their job descriptions may be just, really different. And the last point, I have created a new ladder for the purposes of this talk. It might correspond to a ladder that you know, it might not. And if it does, the correspondence or resemblance is purely coincidental. Now, before we begin, or before we get to the meat of the talk, let's also get over with this topic. You may have heard about 3 terms: programmers, software developers, and software engineers. If you are watching this talk, you probably know who is a programmer, so explaining that would be like bringing wood to a forest. So I'm gonna omit that. And who is a software developer? Well, basically a software developer is a programmer who works for a company which calls programmers software developers. And unsurprisingly, a software engineer is a programmer who works for a company which calls programmers software engineers. Unless you work at a company which uses a different schema, but from my experience, these terms mean pretty much the same thing, so do not dwell on that. Alright, so let's see what is a career ladder and why we need such a thing. As we have seen, a career ladder is a metaphorical ladder. It's not an actual, physical ladder. And it specifies what level an individual can obtain in a company. And to moving up a ladder is an event that signifies career growth. Here are a few examples of engineering career ladders from various companies. These are just from the individual contributor track. We'll also take a look at the management track, managerial track later. And what should be in a ladder? There should be expectations and differences between these levels. Also, what attributes mention or matter for promotion. And what is important is that each level should be actually a different role you don't want people to get promoted and let them keep doing the same thing as they were before. And why do we need a career ladder? I would say that it helps both employees as well as the company. For example, from the engagement viewpoint, people enjoy seeing that their careers either can progress or are progressing. And recognitions and awards are a big part of keeping people engaged. And if you don't have a career ladder, it might actually hurt you, that individuals might consider leaving your company just so they can progress in their careers. Also, a career ladder provides clarity, mainly for individual contributors. For example, if you are a senior software engineer and you would like to move in your career, then it is important to know whether you'll have to go into management or whether there is an individual contributor track for you, a technical track for you to continue. Also, it forces the company to be more clear about the expectations from people. And if you move to higher positions, the expectations are often rather fuzzy, and even managers do not know what they expect from people on those positions, like a staff software engineer, a principal software engineer, or a distinguished software engineer. So it's helpful to have a specification of what is expected from you at these roles. Also, a career ladder provides a tool for managers. For example, they can provide better feedback to their subordinates regarding their performance, how well they perform, how bad they perform, what attributes actually matter, what they should focus on, and help you with your individual development, because both you and your manager can see which attributes are very relevant for your work. Also, a career ladder brings consistent and more transparent promotion handling, so you can see which attributes matter for promotion and what you need to do to get promoted. If there is no career ladder, then basically you are at the mercy of your manager, which is not good. It also helps with recruiting. So for example, you can set a hiring bar for each position and prepare a set of questions that you ask those candidates. And in this way, you can do an apples to apples comparisons between candidates if you know the exact requirements and expectations from them. If you do not, then it's like comparing apples to oranges. What is also important, a career ladder provides so-called compensation ranges for HR, human resources, the people department. And as soon as you start hiring people, you need to figure out what you're gonna pay them. And from this viewpoint, it's very important to have compensation ranges. And they can also be used when comparing positions between companies. Now, let's go over some initial remarks concerning career ladders. So first of all, identification. You can either use numbers or job titles. With numbers, for example, you can be an L5 engineer, as we have seen on the Google career ladder, or the equivalent form is senior software engineer. So some companies might use numbers, some job titles. Also internally and externally, it can differ. We'll see. Just be careful with management. In management, it works the other way around. So, for example, top-level management is L1, and below you have L2, and below L3, and so on. So it goes in the opposite direction. So pay attention when speaking about management. Companies might also use the senior prefix to denote a more senior position, meaning that someone is higher on the career ladder when they are senior than we are not senior. Or alternatively, you may see Roman numerals. For example, software engineer 1, software engineer 2, and software engineer 3. And when you are software engineer 3, it means you are higher than software engineer 2. There can be internal company titles and also external ones. As their name suggests, internal titles are used only inside the company. So for example, inside the company, you can talk about engineers by numbers, like L5 engineer, L6 engineer. But externally, you usually use job titles. For example, on LinkedIn. But on LinkedIn, you can use whatever you want generally. But there may be differences between how companies address positions internally and externally. What is also important is that some career ladders can contain only a single track, and some, the more advanced ladders, can have dual tracks. If you have only a single track and you are a senior software engineer, then basically the only way to progress is to move into management. But if you have a dual track career ladder, then there are two separate tracks. One is for individual contributors, the technical track, and one is for management, the managerial track. And you can decide whether you want to focus on improving your technical excellence or whether you want actually move to management. There are also three terms that are being used. One of them is grade, the second one position, and the third one is role. Grade is basically a number that's assigned to positions. So, for example, there can be number 17, which denotes an engineering manager or a lead software engineer. And these two positions might have the same compensation ranges, and companies might use this grade when comparing people from their own company to other companies. And in this way, they can compare, for example, using the high methodology, HAY level or grade, to compare people from various companies. Position, that's actually where you are located on the job ladder, and there can be an associated job title to that position. And a role is something what you do. So for example, one may be a senior software engineer, be on that position, have that job title, but can have a role of a team lead, meaning that they lead a small team. Or they can have a role of a project manager, meaning that they also do project management, or a product manager, meaning that they also do product management. So it's important to keep in mind the difference between these two terms. Generally, the higher up you go on the ladder, the more, let's say, different or strategic your job is. As I have said, you really want people to have different roles when advancing. So from this viewpoint, the higher up you go, the more strategic your job should be, the more you should bring to the company. Also, what is generally understood is when you are promoted, you usually receive a compensation adjustment. Usually you receive more money with a promotion, but sometimes it's true. Usually it's true. Sometimes it might not be true. Also, I would like to discuss or mention several anti-patterns. The first one is job title inflation. Sometimes company want their engineers to have titles which they don't deserve. For example, I have seen horrible stories from the US where the entry level after finishing school was a senior software engineer. That was the entry level. Then after where you are promoted to senior architect. And that's just crazy. Or with consulting agencies, what they have found out is that they can charge more for seniors. So in a consulting agency, everybody is a senior, so they can charge more money. But it's just an anti-pattern. The second anti-pattern is that when job titles do not correspond to the actual positions, there might be people who have held a certain position in the past, and nobody had the guts or heart or courage to take the title away from them. So there might be directors who do not have any managers, who do not manage any managers, or there may be people in leading positions who do not actually lead anyone. And I also don't think this should happen. The job title and your position should always reflect what you actually do. And the last anti-pattern is being promoted, but keeping doing the same work as before. So if you are promoted 3 times and you still keep doing what you're doing, then I think something might be wrong. Now, there are some common questions in regards to career ladders. The first one, the most obvious one, is how many levels there should be. I would say that it depends on the size of your company. If you are Google, feel free to go with 10 levels. But if you are just a middle-sized company, I think 5 or 6 levels may be just enough. Another question is whether compensation should be directly tied to levels or positions. I would say it should not. It usually is, but I think it should not, because when it is, and you want to increase salary of a certain individual above the compensation range, you need to promote them even if they are still doing the same work, which I don't think is a valid reason to promoting someone just to be able to give them more money. You should just be able to give them more money without promotion. Also, whether level changes come with more responsibility. I would say they should. The higher up you go, the more responsible you should be, but opinions varies. Another question is when a person should be promoted. My opinion on that is you should be promoted when you are already doing the job, the next position. So if you are doing the work of a senior software engineer, then you should be promoted to a senior software engineer, not before and expect people to just start doing senior software engineer's work. Also, there are so-called career positions, and you should decide which levels are, let's say, final. What I mean by that, a person might decide to stay indefinitely in these positions, and it is just fine. So for example, I think a senior software engineer is the first position that you can be really comfortable in, and it could be a career position because companies need solid senior software engineers. But you definitely don't want to stay at the, let's say, junior software engineer position for too long. Also, it's kind of important to decide what does senior mean in your company. And I think that can be one thing that should be solved first. So you should first decide what do you expect from your senior software engineers, and then work out the rest of the ladder. But really just start with what do you mean by when a person is a senior software engineer, let's say. And the last question is, who is responsible for product and project management? Sometimes you have dedicated positions, so you can have a dedicated product manager or dedicated project manager, but sometimes these two roles are given to managers or team leads or other positions, so really it depends. Let's take a look how you can specify ladder and position requirements. So basically there are 3 ways that I've seen. Usually there is a diagram or a list of the positions that are available, And then there are job descriptions, either job descriptions or something known as a snowflake model, and something called a competency matrix. First, let's take a look at job descriptions, or JDs for short. These, from my experience, are usually created by HR, sometimes from a template, and they may be very fuzzy. I have seen a job description for a junior software engineer position, which said that those people could only be testers and do testing, which is ridiculous. Junior software engineer is more than just a tester. But I think you can get the gist of job descriptions by just looking at this particular example. I don't say that all job descriptions are bad. There can be some good ones, but you have to take care of, really focusing on the content of those to make it specific and useful. The second model is called a snowflake model, popularized by Medium, and which I think does no longer use that model. They switch to something else. But nevertheless, it can be a useful model for your company, which you might consider. And in this model, it's a robust system for scoring individuals across many dimensions, and then use a formula to ascertain their level. And what it takes into consideration is that everyone can be good at different things, and you might want to incorporate that in your model. So here we have 16 different categories, like project management, communication, mentorship, community, and you can score 0 to 5 points in each of these 5 directions. And for each, let's say, point, you increase your total number of points, and then you can see how many points you need to, go to the next level. And engineers and programmers, they really like numbers. And honestly, I'm getting excited even talking about that, seeing that you need 2 points to get to the next level. And it's a very robust model, although it can be difficult to both design and use by management. I imagine you would need a lot of training, but when designed properly, I think it could be a useful model. The third way, that's probably my favorite, the most favorite one. It's called a competency matrix, or a spreadsheet matrix, or a skill matrix. You get a spreadsheet, or create a spreadsheet. In rows, you have positions like engineer 1, engineer 2, and so on. And in columns, you have competencies: technical skill, impact, communication, leadership, what have you. And then you just need to fill each of the boxes with what is expected from a person on that position with regards to all these competencies. And then people can really see, what is expected from them, if they want to get promoted, what they need to do, and so on. So this can be another way of specifying career ladders and position requirements. So finally, let's see an example ladder and go over position overviews. Here is an example of a dual track career ladder that I created. I think it's similar to career ladders that are usually used in the industry, although it can differ. And as I have said, it's just my opinion on how a dual track career ladder could look like. So don't judge me. You can see that, let's start at the beginning. There are 2 positions which I would say are transient. You don't want people to stuck indefinitely in those. You either want to promote them towards senior software engineer or fire them if they are unable to progress. But these, I would suggest, these are not career positions. The first career position is senior software engineer, and people can decide to stay there and be senior software engineers for the rest of their lives. I think it's very reasonable and it's all right choice if you don't want to move into leadership. If you want to progress, you will need to go into leadership, and you can choose whether to go into management or technical leadership, which is called the individual contribution track. There also might be positions in between. I have created one such position called the lead software engineer, which is in the middle, as we're gonna see. Basically, what I would say up until this level, it's enough for you to just do tickets and just, ticket after ticket. After that, I think you will have to learn to think more strategically. But that's just an exaggeration, so forgive me. You can be a senior software engineer and think very strategically. Last thing that I would like to mention is that I think I have a good grasp of this part. I have held all these, although not the positions, I have held all these roles. So I've been a manager and lead software engineers and performed task of staff software engineer. So I think I can fairly clearly explain what these positions do or what people at those positions do. These will be more fuzzy ones. I don't have direct experience with those, so my knowledge is based only on what I have read. But I think we might be fine there. Now, before we take a look at all those positions, I would like to mention that usually the higher up you go in the career ladder, the more power you have to influence things, which is kind of expected. Also, the more responsibility you have, the more responsibility for your people, for your projects. As I have said, the more strategically you have to think it. From some point, it stops being possible for you, to just do ticket after ticket. You will have to do something else. Also, that's kind of expected. The higher up you go, the higher your compensation packages. On the downside, the higher you go, the more you have to deal with people and the more meetings you're gonna have. If you thought that going to the individual contributor track will enable you to get around communicating with people or not have any meetings at all, that's impossible. And you will have very hard life if you go into those positions with that kind of mindset. So if you go into a leadership based position, you will have to deal with people and you're gonna have a lot of meetings. Although you can choose what you're gonna want to discuss at those meetings or with those people. If you decide to go with the managerial track, you may, for example, deal with performance evaluations, performance issues with people when someone is underperforming or overperforming. If you go to the technical track, you might also deal with performance, but performance of systems, how to improve performance of systems, and discuss this with people. So it's up to you which is more suitable for you and which would you like to deal with. Also, unfortunately, the higher up you go, the less coding you will do, and you can't expect, for example, to be coding like 90% of the time during your entire career, unless you stop at senior software engineer. It's also possible. But if you move to management or to leadership-based technical positions, then you will code generally less than you would do at the beginning of your career. Also, the higher up you go, the fewer people are on that position. So you might feel kind of lonely, but that's the way it is. Also, the higher up you go, the more abstract the job descriptions are, and we're gonna see that if you are a VP or distinguished software engineer, it might be unclear what you have to do. And also, the higher up you go, the more soft skill matter over hard skills. So it may be more beneficial for you to work on your communication skills, persuasion skills, how to communicate with people, and so on, than focusing on sharpening your hard skills. So, all right, so let's start with a junior software engineer. For each of those positions, I have illustrated the years of experience. You just take it as an illustration. It doesn't have to be true, just to give you something to start with. And the gist for this position is that's either a student or an out-of-school person or out-of-bootcamp person who has just started their career. They are excited, they are eager to learn, and you can work with that. What they do, they generally, what you would expect, implement features, debug and fix bugs, write tests, and so on. And the downside is that junior people usually require a lot of guidance, probably from a senior software engineer who is their mentor. So from the short-term perspective, it has negative impact on your project, and it's more an investment for the future. You know, you can train your juniors the way you want, and they will be profitable later. Main focus for junior software engineers is to learn engineering principles, how things work, how you should code, how you should do a pull request, code reviews, things like solid principles, clean code, and so on. How to use your editor, debugger, how do databases work, caching, HTTP, what have you, just to learn those, the basics. Also, a junior needs to learn how to communicate, how to ask their mentor or supervisor for clarification when something is unclear in the ticket, and how to deliver feedback that they are stuck and cannot continue. And one important thing is that they should try to learn how to become more self-sufficient, because you can't all, lead juniors by their hand all the time, and people need to start becoming more self-sufficient to be productive. Now the second position is called usually software engineer or a mid-level software engineer. This is a person who's no longer a junior, but is still learning the ins and outs of the whole development lifecycle, specifying requirements, design, implementation, testing, deployment, maintenance, and so on. They also implement features, investigate and solve bugs, and anything else that you would expect from such a position. They can be given a well-defined ticket or a small-ish project. By well-defined, I mean that usually you have to list everything that you need them to do. They are not yet at the position of figuring everything by themselves. So if the ticket is well-defined, you have a reasonable chance that they will do a great job with that, but they still require guidance. And their main focus, I would say, is to, learn everything there can be about development and move into the senior software engineer position. Also, they need to work on improving their development efficiency, so to be more productive, be faster, learn how to use your editor, how to type on keyboard efficiently, and so on. And also, they need to focus on the quality of the produced work, because the code that they write, it usually works, but might not be the best. For example, from the architectural or maintenance or testability point of views, there might be issues. Also, software engineers need to gain technical depth. They need to learn, what there is about. They use databases, systems, message brokers, caching systems, what have you. And also understand how their work fits into the larger picture. You cannot just focus on your own ticket and just disregard anything else there is, and try to understand how your work fits into the bigger picture. What's the goal? What's the end goal? Not just to finish yet another ticket, but there has to be a meaningful goal. And one of the most important things, software engineers need to learn how to be more self-sufficient. Now, let's take a look at our senior software engineers. I would describe it as a seasoned, independent professional with deep technical knowledge. And I would say that they are people who get a lot of done. They are generally considered as workhorses of engineering, and you can focus on them to be really productive. And a company needs a lot of good solid senior software engineers. Basically, you can give them an epic or lots of tickets or a medium-sized project, and these can even have very vague descriptions and specifications, but senior software engineers should be able to figure those requirements out, ask people, work by themselves, and they are almost completely independent. They also know they use technologies, for example, databases. They have very good technical depth knowledge of those. From the depth orientation, we'll see later, there will be a position that will be more focused on breadth. But a senior software engineer, I would expect them to be more depth oriented. When considering their work outside of their team, they usually, I would say, have passive contributions. For example, they may provide feedback on various issues, on proposals, or they might be able to do consultations regarding technical issues, but they are not those who generally drive initiatives in a cross-team manner. They are mentors. They train new members, new hires. And so if you have lots of juniors, you need to keep in mind that you will need to dedicate part of your senior software engineers' time to mentor them. And they also should share knowledge by doing workshops, trainings, presentations, and so on. Let's first discuss the managerial track, and then we'll take a look at the individual contributor track. So an engineering manager is a person who manages a team of, I would say, 5 to 10 people, although opinions differ. Some say, let's say 6 to 9, some say 5 to 10, let's say 5 to 10. They are usually individual contributors like senior software engineers, or juniors. And managers generally work through those people. And you might have heard that being a good manager is about setting your people up for success and provide the environment for them and let them do their best. So an engineering manager cares for the well-being of members of the team. They need to ensure that people are satisfied at their work, have regular one-on-one meetings with them to discuss their development, what they like, dislike, what's the current status of their work, and so on. They also write so-called performance reviews, which may be used for promotions or to see how people in their team are doing. They need to manage performance issues, so if they have a team member who is underperforming, they need to work on that with them. And if someone is an overperformer, they can assign bonuses to those people. They also generally, I would say, handle administrative tasks. And communicate with other departments, like an HR department when a contract needs to be amended, or with IT when the workstation or notebook of a team member breaks down, and so on. They generally maintain their budgets for their team and headcounts, so they know how many people they can hire. They also handle salary increases. When someone is doing a great job, they can increase their salary depending on the budget. They also hire people, promote people, and unfortunately, they also have to fire people when they are either underperforming for a very long time, or they are no longer being able to have them in their team due to restructuring and so on. Sometimes an engineering manager may be also a product manager, so they might need to do product management, gathering product requirements, creating roadmaps, or prioritizing tickets. And also sometimes engineering managers might need to do project management, so planning which tasks should be done next, assign those to their team members, specify when each task should be finished, monitor how the team members are doing when implementing those tasks. When a task is finished, they need to evaluate the results and provide feedback to the team member how good they did. And they also might be in charge of eliminating roadblocks. For example, when people in your team are waiting for another team, the manager or the project manager should step up and discuss that with that team and ensure that your people are not stuck. Also, that's an exaggeration. An engineering manager might do a lot of other things, more strategic things, and so on. But I would say that's the gist. If we move to the next level, it's usually called an engineering director. The gist is that that's a person who manages a team of managers. So it's no longer solely individual contributors, but this person manages, let's say, 3 to 6 managers who manage their own teams. Their responsibilities, I would say, are similar to engineering manager, but on a larger scale, because they are responsible for many teams and many projects. And so you can't just do everything an engineering manager does. You need to take a look at issues from a more higher perspective. I would also say that they should have at least department level impact or division level impact. So they should work with other directors in the engineering department to have that level of impact. And well, that's an engineering director in a nutshell, at least from my perspective, which is very limited. At the top of the management path, we have a person who might be called VP of engineering, which is an abbreviation of vice president. The gist is that that's the person who manages a team of directors. And each director manages a team of managers, and each manager manages a team of individual contributors. So I can illustrate that in this way. They are basically responsible for anything that happens in the department, and it's on their head if there is something wrong. They should have company level impact. So for example, they might report to a CTO. And they are, let's say, pretty much on their own. They can talk to other VPs or their directors or the CTO, but it's kind of expected of them to figure things out. And that's their job. And then what they also do, that's kind of fuzzy, but they should establish your engineering culture and set operations. What I mean by that, for example, they should take a look at how developers or engineers are writing code, whether it's maintainable or testable, and ensure that there's a culture of writing, maintainable and clean code. From the point of hiring, they should focus on generally which people are you hire and what kind of people you want in your engineering department. In terms of rewards, what behaviors are wanted, what behaviors are unwanted. They should also focus on trainings and workshops for engineers. They should also track existing projects to know, what's the department working on, and have procedures and steps to do when something goes awry, like how to deal with projects that get into trouble. So these sort of things may be expected from a VP of engineering. All right, so now we have seen the positions on the managerial track, and let's take a look at the individual contributor track. The first position might be called a staff software engineer. And let me first focus on that prefix staff. Generally, it's used as a prefix for people who are on a higher level than seniors. So it's a software engineer, senior software engineer, and then a staff software engineer. The origin is from military, and people in military and in engineering often use this prefix. For example, you can have a sergeant and a staff sergeant, and staff sergeant is above, let's say, sergeant. And from the etymological point of view, the origin is, as I said, from military. In the past, there were two kinds of officers. One of them was called line officers, which commanded combat units on the field. And the other part were staff officers, which were based in the central command center and perform administration, strategy, and logistics tasks. So that's the origin of the word staff, from staff officers. But in engineering, it usually means a person who is more senior than senior. It's a technical role, and I would say that the staff software engineer might focus on leading the design and development of larger projects. Although as with other positions, their actual job descriptions may differ from company to company. They usually do not have direct reports like an engineering manager would have, and they lead by gravitas, that they are that people look up to them, and then they don't need to use power or authority. They should have natural authority. They should be natural leaders, technical leaders. These are people that I would say should have vast technological knowledge, but in terms of breadth more than depth. So a senior software engineer might know a lot of, let's say, 2 database systems, but a staff software engineer should know about, let's say, 10 database systems, but not in depth, but just to know what are their advantages, disadvantages, and to know in which situations you should use which database engine. So in this sense. In terms of cross-team contributions, these should be the people who drive various technical initiatives. So they should have also contributions outside of their team. There can be various so-called archetypes or roles that people at these positions might have. One of them is often called a tech lead, a technological leader, which means that they lead the development of larger projects. But they are not managers, they do not manage those people, they just lead the development from the technical viewpoint. So they say how things should be done, how things should be implemented, what solutions should be used. Deal with technological issues, technical issues, and so on. The other archetype is usually called an architect. In the past, this was a position, and in some companies it still might be, but now I think it's leaning more towards a role than a position. So a staff software engineer might be an architect and lead the design of large systems, components, or features. That's another possibility. The third archetype that I've seen is called solver. And that's a person who solves really complex technical issues, like from the scalability, reliability point of view. And it also might be a staff software engineer, but have this role. These are also people who write technical specifications or diagrams, architectural documents. They can review and consult technical proposals from other teams. And also they should mentor team members, but on a more higher level issues like design techniques, like systems design, architecture, and so on. So that's, I would say, a staff software engineer in a nutshell. Its job description differs from company to company, so you can take that just as an illustration. If we move further up the ladder, the next position I would name is principal software engineer. It's the technical equivalent of an engineering director, although they do not have direct reports. Another name might be something like a chief architect. They have, again, similar responsibilities to staff software engineers, but on a larger scale, again, similarly as with engineering directors. I would also say that these are people which have either a very extensive industry accomplishments, so they are known for their thing even outside of the company, or they have a very key role in the technology that the company uses. For example, if the company's product is a database system, they might be the person who have designed the system or knows the most about the database engine. So they have a key role from that point of view in that company. In terms of impact, they should have at least department level impact, similar as with engineering directors. They generally work on company-wide, very strategic issues from the technical viewpoint. And their goals are more high level, like let's scale the system up to 100 more users and so on, or increase cash flow. And these are the people who generally set technical directions for the engineering department and for people in there. And they are speakers for the technology that the company is either using or promoting or creating. Now at the top of the ladder, there's a position that's often called a distinguished software engineer. I really have no idea how to describe such a person, which is why I've used the gist technical demigod. You can think about anything you want here. I would say these are generally people who have wide recognition outside of their company. You can think of a creator of a programming language or an operating system, like Guido van Rossum or Linus Torvalds, something like that. So really technologically known person in the industry. Of course, their impact should be at the company level. And what else to say? They are responsible for the technical strategy of all the engineering, and it's the top position that you have on the ladder, at least on my made one ladder. There can be other positions on other companies' ladders, but let's stick with that as the top level position on the technical track. Finally, what we have in the middle is a position that I call a lead software engineer. They manage a small team of, let's say, 2 to 4 people, and they act as an effective member of the team, which means that they do development and they act like, as any other member of their team. Unlike a manager who usually, works through their team members. So this is a person with an active contribution. The number 2 to 4, it depends. From my experience, once you have more than 4 people, I think it becomes less likely that you will be able to act as an effective team member, but that's just me. I would say if you have 7 people reporting to you, then I think this should be a manager, not a lead software engineer. But opinions on that vary, and whatever works for you works. So it's a hybrid between a staff software engineer on the technical track and an engineering manager on the management track. And so they do both of these things, kind of. But I would say, at least from my experience, they usually focus more on the technical side of things than on the people side. So I would say they are more on the individual contribution track, but they manage a team, so they are also managers. So it's something like in between. And I think there is use for such a position in various companies, which is why I decided to include it in the ladder. Sometimes you can see the role of a team lead being used. So in some companies, you can have a staff software engineer, which has the role of a team lead. And in this way, they act as a lead software engineer. So it depends on the company. Now to wrap things up, there can be also other positions and roles which you might have heard about. One of them is project manager, who does care of project management. So you can have a separate position for that, or it can be a role assigned to another position. A product manager, that's a person who takes care of the product management. We already discussed what that is. If you are working with the Scrum Agile methodology, there are 2 positions. One of them is called a Scrum Master, one of them is called a Product Owner. Generally, the Scrum Master is a person who helps with the Scrum process so that people work effectively, they remove roadblocks, and so on. And a Product Owner is responsible for the vision of the product and communication with customers, prioritization, business value, return on investment, and so on. So if you do Scrum, you may have these 2 roles. We already talked about the architect role and the tech lead role. There is also the team lead role, which might be assigned to, let's say, a staff software engineer. So they lead people also from the managerial perspective. At some companies, they might use the senior prefix. So there may be an engineering manager and then a senior engineering manager who either has more experience or manage bigger teams, or what's usual at your company. Then there's the term fellow. I would say it's a pinnacle of achievement for a technically oriented person. It's usually an honorary title, so a person might be at a certain position at your company and additionally have this title. And it's usually awarded to people who are like really famous technically. You can imagine a person who was awarded a Turing Award or a Nobel Prize or something like that, so they can be a fellow. And last but certainly not least, we have the C-level executive suite, like CTO, who can manage VP of engineering, VP of data engineering, VP of research, VP of AI, VP of network security, whatever you have at your company. So these are some other positions and roles that you might see being used. All right, let's wrap up, and by giving you a list of resources that you can use to improve your knowledge of career leaders and career development. First of all, here are some books. In the first part, these are for improving your knowledge from the technical leadership point of view, from the individual contributors track point of view. In the second part, there are books that you can use to improve your managerial skills. You can use the link in the description to this video to download the slides in PDF, and all these links are clickable there, and it will lead you to a page you can use to obtain the books and with details. Also, here are some internet articles which I found useful, and if you would like to know more about the etymology of the staff engineer title, you can take a look here. And I will also highlight my own blog post about not all developers wanting to be managers, that I claim that it's okay, and that there should be 2 separate career tracks for developers. And last, here are some YouTube videos which I found useful, and you can also take a look at them. Alright, my friends, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if you have any questions or feedback in comments, and I'll see you in the next video.